hard work, and I think, but we got through a lot, as we'll see when we get to the decisions and instructions. So in terms of running today's session, the agenda takes us first to approval of pronouncements, but actually we did that last week. So the first item will be approvals of the 2 exposure drafts, and we'll take ED 79 before ED 74. Then we'll go to review of the decisions and instructions, and then in the balance of time that we've got available at that stage, we'll carry on the discussions on natural resources before we move into Ross's programme and technical director's report. So that's the running order in terms of today. So I think at this stage, probably the thing to do is, if we, Ross, unless there's anything else you can think of, I think we'll move over to. Okay, so head into ED 79, Ross?
Yes, we are, Ian.
Okay. So in terms of this document, what we've got is only one change to the authoritative text, which was to action instruction from the board to split paragraph, what was part E of paragraph 51E into para 52. Can I just check everyone's content with that? Todd.
Thanks, Ian. I think the wording in 52 could be simplified a little bit, and I could provide some drafting through to staff. It wouldn't change the disclosure requirement, but I think it could be simplified.
Okay, thanks, Todd. So, I mean, just to clarify, this will be subject to the normal editorial process. So if you can put it into that, Todd, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, I'm not seeing any other flags raised. So then we move into the basis for conclusions. This is non-authoritative, but I thought we should have a look at it, as it's meant to reflect the board's thinking. Joe, no changes through until BC6.
No, and I've been through all the comments that received. There was nothing significant. I've accepted all the comments that I've got. BC6 changed strict criteria to specific criteria. The rest of it was just merely edits. There's a bit of clarification in one of the paragraphs, BC9, that Lindy sent through, so I've amended that. But there was really nothing earth-shattering.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So if I take any comments on the scope section BC6 and BC7. Then we've added BC8 in the definitions. And then we've got a couple of changes on measurement in BC9 and BC12. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands raised. Mike.
It was just a question, Chair. I just want to make sure that Joe got it. We're inconsistent in the use of the word board or IPSASB in the document. Sometimes we refer to the board, other times to the IPSASB.
Yeah, no, they've all been changed to the IPSASB. I went back and looked at how we had done other BCs, and we always refer to the IPSASB rather than the board. So I've made those amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think with that, we confirm the approval that we gave the other day. Obviously, this will now await issue with the other documents that we're looking to approve, ED 76 through to ED 78. If there are any amendments that come up because of the completion of those documents, obviously those will come back, but otherwise, subject to the editorial process, this is now ready to go. Okay, so I think with that we move on to the revisions to ED 74, and Dave, you're going to take us through those.
So Ian, I'll take us through the, sorry, Ian, I missed that.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Dave.
Okay, so I'll take us through what I consider the 4 bigger changes. The first one was where the IPSASB helped clean up the objective section. So that's on, I think, page 3 of the document. Then we moved into the BCs, where we deleted the examples that were embedded in the BCs. The next change was in the implementation guidance, A4. This implementation guidance only dealt with accounting for borrowing costs at the entity level. I added a paragraph to explain how you would deal with it at the consolidated level as well. A member thought that would help constituents obviously deal with it at the consolidated level. And then the last change was the reason that we had to bring this back to begin with. This is where I updated the first and last illustrative example, IE1 through IE3 and IE13 through IE15, where originally I had prorated the borrowing costs based on the amount spent on the qualifying asset. And now what I've done is I've capitalized all the borrowing costs and then subtracted any investment income that was earned on those borrowings. So those were the 4 significant changes. And then I would like to highlight one proposed change that's come out of the editorials over the weekend. And that was where a few members have indicated they were uneasy with the title that I've come up with. I came up with non-authoritative amendments to IPSAS 5. And some members indicated they thought it was a confusing title. The other suggestion we have is IPSAS 5 borrowing cost, non-authoritative guidance. So I'd be interested in board members' views on the title.
Thanks, Dave. And that was on the basis that there is no non-authoritative guidance at the moment, so it's adding non-authoritative guidance. Okay, Mike.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose I thought the word amendments was helpful because otherwise, does anybody know we've made a change?
Yeah, the problem is that we haven't got any non-authoritative guidance at the moment, so there's nothing to amend. So actually, just calling it non-authoritative guidance actually is, you know, it does what it says on the tin.
Okay, I suppose I might have been helpful to say I prefer to say non-authoritative guidance added, but it's getting too long-winded. Okay, I'll leave it. Thanks.
Yeah. David, as chair of the task force.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just Mike, we also thought that if we change the title, we'd just do a couple of editorial changes to the first page to make it clearer that we're adding something that wasn't already there.
Thomas.
Yeah, just from a reader's perspective, I'm just wondering whether kind of the title non-authoritative guidance could kind of indicate that it's something unimportant you don't need to look at. I know the preparers outside, and if there's something coming like non-authoritative, then they say, okay, we have enough to read, so let's skip that.
Well, I think to be honest on this one, Thomas, you know, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. The title non-authoritative guidance is factually correct. We can't call it amendments because we haven't got any guidance, non-authoritative guidance to amend. You know, it is illustrative guidance. It's illustrative. You know. So I think we just need to get it out. To be honest. So I think it is factually correct. So if members are happy, I propose we go with that. Okay. So are there any other comments on the changes that have been proposed? Obviously, as David has highlighted, there will be some consequentials because we've in terms of we've got, if you look at page 3, you've got the title there spelt out, so there will be some consequentials which we'll go through, we'll clean up in the editorial process. I just want to check, are there any other comments that members have got? Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands raised. Ross, I think it's over to you then in terms of the approval process.
Yes, thanks, Chair. And just a reminder on the voting process. First, I'm going to ask if you vote against the approval of the ED to raise your hand. I'll then ask if you're abstaining to raise your hand. And then finally, if you approve the approval of the ED, you can leave your hand down. And after each question, I'll just read out any hands that happen to be up. So if we can start the vote now. First, if you vote against the approval of ED 74, please raise your hand. And just confirming, I don't see any hands raised. If you wish to abstain from voting for ED 74, please raise your hand. And I don't see any hands raised. And if you approve the approval of ED 74, please keep your hand down. And there are no hands raised. So that would be 0 votes against, 0 abstentions, and 17 voting for the pronouncement, and 1 absent, as James Jung is not in attendance at the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Ross. Thanks, Dave. Anything else staff need from us at this stage?
Just on the exposure period, we're going to get this out as soon as we can get through the editorial process, and it will be a normal, well, we're proposing a normal 4-month exposure period for this. In some cases on minor amendments such as these, we might go shorter than that, but given the COVID crisis and in due process, it's 4 months. We don't see any reason to make it any shorter, nor see any reason to make it any longer than that.
Okay, thanks, Ross. We did have a bit of discussion yesterday. Last week in terms of sequencing, which is a challenge. Okay, so with that, we conclude the item in terms of approvals. So then we move on to the decisions and instructions.
Yes, so I'm going to walk us through the decisions and instructions, and Dave and I are going to manage this one together. Just going to share my screen so you can see them. Just a second. So you should be able to see the Word document on my screen, and this is the Word document that was circulated yesterday evening that staff have been working through since Friday with various task force chairs, myself, and Ian to get this in a place to approval. I propose that we go item by item and discuss as needed. And just so I can see the hands going up, I'll have to take down the sharing the screen as we get into the discussions.
I'm glad you said that, Ross, because I was just thinking this is a challenge. So yeah, okay.
So I think we'll start with ED 73, and I'll stop sharing. Any comments on ED 73?
No, I think we're fine on that.
Yeah.
So we move on to ED 74.
So just so you can see ED 74, we have one decision and 2 instructions there. I'll stop sharing again so we can see the screen. Any comments on those? Mike, sorry, Ian?
Thanks, Ross. Thanks, Chair. Just a point of clarification for both 74 and agenda item 5. Do we have to get you to prepare the at-a-glance document? Are they needed in these cases, or is it just a thing staff always do?
Yeah, we normally do an at-a-glance for all of our documents except for an improvements document. So we will be doing short at-a-glance. Well, we won't be doing one for ED 73 because it's fairly straightforward. But for public sector specific financial instruments, we will prepare an at-a-glance. And just for other members' information and reminder, the at-a-glance is our staff document, so we don't review those at the board. But they tend to just highlight key points from the documents themselves.
Okay, so move us on to item 5.
So item 5, public sector specific financial instruments. There's just one instruction and one decision here because it's been approved.
Linda.
Thank you. There was a discussion on updating the staff Q&A with the history of the project and what has been included and not. I'm not sure if that's a staff instruction though, because it's not something the board will have a look at, but it was a discussion.
Thanks, Lindy. That's noted, and that's definitely on the list of things for staff to deal with as we complete this project.
Mike.
Thanks, Chair. The instructions to staff, the second last dot point on page 2, where there's a reference to coordinate with IPSASB members on the suggested amendments to the RFI. I think that should be the IPSASB working group and task force.
You've headed on to leases, Mike. I just want to finish off on public sector specific financial instruments.
I beg your pardon.
Okay, so I think we're good on item 5. So then we can move on to page 2, where we've got most of the decisions and instructions on leases. So Mike, now's your chance.
Yeah, I've got minor edits, but I won't go through those now. But the issue for me was just the second last dot point instructions to staff. So coordinate with IPSASB members on the working group and task force, because there were 2 different parties there. There's the task force and the working group. Just make that clear, I suppose. It's not all members.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So I've got Lynn and Todd.
Thanks, Ian. So I had a couple of comments on the decisions. The first was on the 4th bullet point, where it's not clear what the decision was. Was it to accept the marked up terminology or approve the marked up or action the marked up terminology? It wasn't clear in what the decision was. And then my other comment on the decisions is that the last 2 bullet points appear to contradict each other a bit. One says that we will ask for information on arrangements on how those are being accounted for, and then the last one says we won't ask for views. So I think we need to be clear what we're asking for or not and what the decision was there.
Thanks, Lynn. So I think just clarifying on those, certainly I think your first point is well taken, that we need the right verb attached to that in terms of approval or agreement. on that one, I think we need to get the drafting clear that we're not asking for views on what should be in the our accounting guidance on this, but we are asking for views on the national level guidance. Sorry, on not views, what the national level guidance is, if any, at the moment. So if that's okay, we'll get that clarified. Okay, thanks for that. So Todd, you were next, and then Mark.
Yeah, no, I had the same point as Lynn. I think on the last two bullet points under the decisions, we need to be clear that what we want is to get the information from our constituents about the types of arrangements they have and how they account for them. And you're right, we don't want to elicit anything from them in terms of the accounting that we might end up proposing, because that is more of a consultation type matter. The only other thing that I just wanted to confirm, I think it's the 7th bullet point. At one stage, I wondered, were we getting the task force to reconsider the material about COVID-19, or did we decide to actually keep it in the end? It might have been that we decided that we would keep it, but I think there was some talk about maybe the task force looking at it. So I just wanted to confirm that bullet point.
So my recollection was that the board actually decided that we should retain it, but that we would need to include something in a BC that referred to keeping that situation under review. Mike, are you in on that?
Yeah, that's my recollection, and that's what we're planning to do. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Lynn, were you in on that as well? Okay, so I'll go to Mark and then back to Lynn. Thanks, Tom.
I have a comment on the 6th bullet, which says to include a paragraph in the BCs of ED 75 on concessional leases. Shouldn't it be rather be on the concessionary component of a lease? Because I thought the concessional lease, the lease contract itself, would be dealt with actually with IFRS with ED 75.
That seems logical. Okay, I see notes on that. Thanks, Mark. So, Lynn, you don't want to come back in again now? Okay. So I think then that moves us on to agenda item 7. And I think what we'll do on this is, because it's quite long, we'll take the first page and get any comments on that, and then move on to the second page, and then the third page.
So I'll just share the first page now.
So just to clarify, we're on decisions here.
So we're talking decision 722 to 7210.
Okay, thanks, Ross. So Ajith, you were first, and then Todd.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I'm on agenda item 7.2, measurement hierarchy application. We have 2 bullet points there. The first bullet point, the measurement guidance, the text on the measurement guidance related to initial recognition. And the second one is the measurement hierarchy applicable to the subsequent measurement. Those who relate the text relating to those 2 areas. And I think we also decided to take up any issues relating to the measurement hierarchy, to address any issues relating to the measurement hierarchy after looking at the text.
Sorry, Ajith, I'm struggling to hear you. I don't know whether you can speak closer to the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better, thanks.
Okay, the first bullet in 722, measurement hierarchy application. There are 2 bullet points there. There we say first bullet refers to the initial recognition, the text on the initial recognition, and the second bullet refers to the text relating to the subsequent measurement. And I believe we also decided that after looking at the text relating to the initial measurement and the subsequent measurement, that we will review any issues that relate to the measurement hierarchy that is highlighted from the text.
Sorry, I missed that last bit again. Sorry,
Yeah, after reading the text, we decided to take up any issues relating to the measurement hierarchy after reading the text.
So I don't think we agreed that we would reopen the measurement hierarchy at this stage, but this is obviously a decision that's subject to review of the material, because there's quite a few different conflicting views, and it seemed, in terms of summarising that discussion, that we should actually see the drafting splitting between initial measurements of initial recognition and measurement subsequent. So I think that was about as far as we went at that stage, and clearly we will need to come back to that in October. Ross, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, just one point to highlight is it's quite confusing for this item because of the length, but we do have instructions that relate to this down below in 7.22. So revising the application of the measurement hierarchy and subsequent measurement for board review in October. So that might partially address your point, Ajith.
Okay. So that was, is in, what's the reference number for that? The reference to that is, it's in the, I didn't get the reference.
So we're on page, that instruction is on page 5, where it says include draft initial measurement guidance in core text of ED for board review in October, and include a revised text on application and measurement hierarchy on subsequent measurement for board review in October.
Okay.
So Ross, these two need to be read together. So then I've got Todd and Lynn.
Thanks, Ian. I'm on 7.2.5, and I suppose it was when I read what was on page 3 in conjunction with what was on page 5 that I was questioning whether we actually landed on not having amortized cost as an historical cost measurement technique. My recollection was that we definitely wanted the further analysis carried out around the techniques that should be associated with historical cost, but I don't recall us saying we definitely would do away with amortized cost. It didn't make sense just to have amortized cost because it was very much in a financial instrument sense. So if we're going to have measurement techniques for historical cost, we wanted the task force, I think, to go away and think about the suite of things that we needed as techniques under historical cost. And so I'm open, I think, based on the discussion, that we may have amortized cost there, so long as we've thought it through and are actually dealing with historical cost for all items that might, require a historical cost measurement basis.
Thanks, Todd. Lynn, you were giving thumbs up and Mike was to that. Was that the point you wanted to come in on?
Yeah, absolutely. Todd's made my exact point.
Okay. So I think basically we're proposing that we delete the decision, but the instruction stands. Kamira, were you in on that, or did you have another point you wanted to make?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I had another point. I also agree with Todd, but I had a point in agenda item 7.2.3. It was not clear for me if we decided not to use the name of cost of settlement instead of, I agree that we decided to keep the definition, but about the naming, maybe you can clarify that, because we are also using the cost of settlement term in other agenda items, for instance, in agenda item 7.2.9. Thanks.
Thanks, Kamira. No, I think it was a decision that we should carry on with cost of fulfillment because there was opposition to the change to cost of settlement. So there probably are some references still because of the titles of the papers. But then when we come back next time round, all references will be to cost of fulfillment. Maybe we just need to make an instruction to clarify that if we haven't got that already. Okay, thanks for that. So that was on page 3. So we're then moving through to decisions, items 7 to 11 to 724, 7 to 24, page 4. So Lisby, you're on that.
Sorry, Chair. I'm on, sorry, 7.2.9. So instead of cost of settlement, should we use cost of fulfillment there? Thanks, Chair.
So you're saying we need to change that to cost of fulfillment. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Lucy. Okay. So then we're back on page 4. Any comments from members on that? Adrienne.
I had hoped we were leaving that open, given the need to deal with distressed assets. So maybe you want to say something about that.
So just to clarify, so there was a confusion between Adrienne and I on Friday over process. Because I'd summed up the item and Adrienne thought we were going to carry on. Now, in the discussion to just clear that up afterwards, Adrienne expressed a concern about net selling price in the context of the likely level of distressed asset sales. And if you look under the relevant item on the instruction, there is an instruction for staff to review how we communicate our consideration of that point. So on that, Adrienne, I think basically we need to leave staff to actually review how best to address that given the existing decision. If there still is a problem as a result of looking at it from the point of view of the existing board decision to delete net selling price, then it's certainly open to come back and have that debate. But the proposed way forward is we look at the drafting and then see how it reads, because I think the communication to constituents is actually different to whether we continue to need the technical question as to whether we need to have a separate basis, or it's dealt with through impairment requirements elsewhere. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and I was going to come on to that when we talked about instruction. So that instruction has been included to review the communication on that. Okay, so if we go on then to page 5, that's the remainder of the decisions 7.2.25 through to 7.2.28. And then we move into the instructions. Lindy.
Lindy, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. We never reviewed agenda item 731, which is the conceptual framework and amendments made to it. So I don't know if we need some decision or instruction to give inputs on it, or is that something we would do at a meeting?
We didn't specifically ask for inputs on the drafts, mainly because they're very much work in progress at this stage. So if there are any high-level comments that members or TAs want to make, that's certainly open to you. But the idea is that the detailed review of both ED76 and in particular ED77, we would come back to, in particular ED77 will be the core item for the September check-in. So you'll have updates at that stage. So we knew a lot was going to change. So there wasn't a specific request for comments on those. If that makes sense. Okay, so instructions to staff then on page 5. Any other comments on that? So then we move on to page 6 and the instructions to staff, and that's where that bullet point on 7220 on net selling price comes in. That we consider that. Lynn, and then Todd.
So mine was on page 7, just checking we are on page 7 now, yeah? Yeah.
No, I'm still finishing off on page 6, actually.
Okay, so mine was on page 7, so.
Okay, if I can just finish off, Todd, you've got a point on page 6?
Yes, thanks, Ian. It's the top of page 6, agenda item 7.2.9 on the income approach. I don't recollect that as an instruction, and if it was, then it's actually inconsistent with what we've got in 7.2.9 under the decisions, because we had decided that the income approach could only be used for fair value, value in use, and cost of fulfillment, not current costs. So there's a disconnect there somewhere for me.
Thanks, Todd. Dave, do you want to comment back on that, or Ross?
So I'll come back on it. So Todd, I think you're right. I think we agreed that income approach applied to 3 measurement bases. And I thought the board asked us to look into further whether it applied to current cost. And if it does, provide examples to illustrate to the IPSASB. I can clear up the wording if you agree with that.
Okay, so if you can correct the wording, that's good, thanks. Okay, so now we're on the instructions on the top of page 7. So Lynn.
Yeah, I just thought it would be helpful in the first bullet point of ED 79, the decision there, where we've got no extra disclosure should be added.
I'm finishing on the other 2 items.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Mike, are you on measurement EDs, or are you on the next item?
No, I'm on the measurement. I just wanted to remind myself, Dave, I wasn't sure where I raised the point about dealing with restricted assets and where a decision was made to have a look at it, because I couldn't find it. So I just made a note for myself to raise it there.
Dave?
So Mike, where that'll come through is on page 7 in the improvements to replacement cost and fair value guidance. There's no explicit instruction, but I can add that.
Thank you.
Let me add that.
David?
Thank you. Mike raised the point under heritage. So it wasn't under measurement, it was under heritage.
No, well, I should have raised it under measurement, David, because I think it applies to both.
Well, it does, but I don't recall you raising it under measurement.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure where to raise it, to be honest, because it wasn't anywhere. So I just popped it in there. But I mean, the issue for me is around restricted assets generally, not just measurement of heritage assets.
Okay, so factually, if we include it under heritage and then say, and consider whether there's any more general application, or is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, right. So now we move on to ED 79, the decisions and instructions. Lynn, third time lucky.
Third time lucky. It's only a small point. It's the first bullet point. I think we should make it clear that the decision was as a result of this project being a limited scope alignment project.
Fine, and if we just make sure that the wording there is consistent with what we've got in the, because it's picked up again in the basis for conclusions, I think, as well. Okay. Mike?
Thanks, Chair. I'm on the second dot point under decision ED 79 to use the IPSAS definition of a cash generating unit. I thought we also said there should be a BC to that effect, or why?
Ross, on that?
Yeah, Mike, we tend, all decisions should end up in a BC describing, so we're trying not to to note each BC as a decision, but I think there already is a BC that we just reviewed on ED 79 for that decision. So I don't think there's anything to add.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification, Ross. So then we move on to ED 78. Any points on the decisions on the bottom part of page 7? Then the decisions on page 8. Then on page 9, we move on to instructions to staff. And those continue on page 10. And on to page 11. Lucy, you're on page 11?
Yes, Chair. Agenda item number 2.11, first bullet. I think we have agreed that in the meantime that we cannot define yet the appropriate term, we will use under maintenance. So we will only discontinue the use of backlog maintenance and deferred maintenance. So I suggest that we change bullet number 1 because we intend to use temporarily under maintenance unless a better term will be identified. Thank you.
Just before I get comments, can we just clarify what the decision on that was so that we get consistency? Could staff just remind us what the decision was on that item on under maintenance?
So I thought the decision was to stop using deferred maintenance, and I'm just flipping to see the exact term of the other one we stopped, and then consider the use of under maintenance or a more appropriate term and bring that back. Eamon, can you confirm if I've got that right?
Yeah, that's right. And then so I think Lucy's right. That was the instruction on a general item 9.2.11 on page 8. So I think Lucy's right. We agreed to drop out the other 2 terms, but to reconsider the use of under maintenance.
So we can update the instruction to 9.2.11 to make that more clear.
Okay, everyone happy with that? Thanks, Lucy. So I've got Todd, then Mike, and this is still finishing off the instructions to staff at the top of page 11, yeah?
Yeah. So on 9. Sorry, thanks, Ian. On 9.2.11, I don't know whether we've got quite so precise in terms of the exact questions that we'd asked, because I recollect that we did have the discussion about whether we needed under maintenance, and I certainly had some ideas for how we could reword some of that section so that we didn't need to use the term under maintenance and still get across the same points that we were wanting to. So I don't know about the level of precision in the second bullet point there and the 2 sub-bullet points. But I also had a comment on 9.2.14 and the first bullet point there, and I think we were quite clear that we wanted recommendations about disclosure requirements for the core text, not guidance for the core text. So I think it was, because we had the conversation around it didn't make sense to have authoritative guidance when we didn't have anything in the core text. So we actually wanted staff to go away and think about some recommendations for disclosure requirements that could be in the core text.
Thanks, Todd. Ross, are you going to pick both those points up?
I was going to come in on the first point on the questions, and I think based on the earlier instruction, it would make sense that we soften the wording to say reconsider the first question and the second question in the IGs and the appropriate term for under maintenance. So if Amon's okay with that, I think we can work on the wording and the instructions to make it a little less definitive, because there is some work to do there.
Okay, that's good.
I think Gwenda was probably going to come in on the second one.
Just to agree with Todd, I felt as staff that there was a clear expectation there would be a requirement in the core text, and then so I guess it's an editorial to make that clear. The way the instruction reads at the moment, there seems to be the possibility of only having application guidance, but there's like a flow down. So yes, that needs to be clearer.
Okay, and I think the second bullet point explains that more clearly, that the whatever we put in the core text and or AGs applies across all PP&E. And then the question is, do we need anything on heritage in IG, first of all, and then possibly IE? Okay, so we just need to straighten that out. Okay, and then the final, which is obviously work in progress, we move on to natural resources, agenda item 10. Mike, are you on that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It was just the decision, and maybe I'm splitting hairs, but I thought it should be read a government's sovereign power in its own right does not meet the criteria, because once somebody's taken action under the sovereign powers, it might change the decision. So,
okay, I see thumbs up on that. Lindy, Edwin, you happy with that change?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So with that, we're through the draft decisions and instructions. So thanks to staff and task force chairs for the very quick turnaround on those. I think it does show you what a productive meeting we've had, the fact that we've actually got best part of 11 pages of detailed decisions and instructions, which is, I think, is a great tribute to you know, staff papers, but also tight debate from the board and input from TAs. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. Ross, then just on next steps, are we going to see those back out again, or will they be dropped straight into the draft minutes?
So the plan was, as the boards reviewed them, and I think we've got a few editorials, we'll just pick up those editorials and try and clear them and post them within the next couple of days so we can get right into minute drafting. And just for an update for the board, we've tried to draft them this time more like they would be in the minutes to minimize the amount of difference between editorials we end up making when we do the minutes for consistency of language. So we've tried to pick that up in this first version. So, you know, the real benefit from staff in our view of these decisions and instructions is we can get moving on them and start addressing them. So we'd like to move to get the minutes out and get moving on the papers that we're going to bring to October and later in December.
Okay, great. Well done, everyone. Okay, so with that, we move into, we've now created a gap in the schedule, which means that we can go back to discussion of natural resources. So we go back to you, Edwin. And just in terms of schedule, by my reckoning, we've got about 50 minutes on natural resources before we head back into Todd's program and technical director's report. Okay, so Edwin.
Thanks, Ian. Let me share my screen. Okay. So the next item that we were going to discuss is a survey on the legal framework in various jurisdictions. And this is agenda item 10.2.2. And if you recall from the March meeting when we approved the project brief, it was suggested that the task force reach out to IPSASB members and also to TAs to get a sense of how the legal frameworks operate in their jurisdictions. So by legal framework, I mean how natural resources are I guess, handled and managed by the government in terms of what are the rights and what are the, how the rights are issued to various parties in terms of extracting the resources, performing activities such as evaluation and exploration. So what the task force has done is we've put together a short survey, and that is attached in the appendix to agenda item 10, so 10.3.1. And the survey was really meant to have a very high level discussion of surface rights and subsurface rights. And before actually diving into there, I did get some comments from board members and technical advisors. And I guess I guess I didn't really do a very good job of explaining what surface rights and subsurface rights are. So I'll explain that now. And surface rights are basically landowner rights. So what landowners can do with the property that they own, whereas subsurface rights deals with operations that have to do with extraction or removing mineral resources from the property. So in many jurisdictions, we've found that the two sets of rights are actually very different and they're distinct. So the whole point of the survey was to get more information on these two sets of rights. And as a bit of background, what we plan to do with the responses to the survey is we're not planning to look at every single jurisdiction that we get responses to, but rather we want to group them into various buckets. So we want to say for bucket A, for example, where subsurface rights are very different from surface rights, we are going to talk about how those subsurface rights might impact the assessment of control when looking at unextracted subsoil resources. And for bucket B, for example, where surface rights and subsurface rights are essentially one and the same, we're going to do a separate analysis for how that would impact control for subsoil resources in those jurisdictions. So the first comment I got was to better explain those two sets of rights. And also I got another comment saying that we should add a question to the survey to ask respondents to describe what is being done in the public sector now in their jurisdiction. So we can certainly add that in. Other than that, I just wanted to run a few things by the board. So the first question is whether there are other questions that board members think we should add into the survey. And also the task force agreed that this survey should be limited to IPSASB members, technical advisors, and also specific individuals as identified by the staff. And we wanted to get input on whether you agree with that as well. And for the last question we had was, so we're planning to at least have a draft of the subsoil chapter of the CP by December 2020. So in order for that to happen, we thought that it would be a good idea to get our responses in by October 15th, 2020. So our last question was whether the board agrees with that deadline as well.
Okay, thanks, Edwin. And just to clarify, this isn't a formal board sign-off or anything. It's just actually getting comments and reactions from members. Anything else, as Edwin has said, that needs to be included or clarified in that document.
Yeah.
So any comments members want to make at this stage? Yes, Camira.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Edwin. I will only have some suggestions. First, I agree to limit the distribution of this survey, but why don't we just target in which jurisdictions are these industries as mining and oil industry relevant? Because otherwise we might miss important information. So I would say that just to direct those surveys to those countries that are really in that case, those natural resources are relevant. And secondly, about the questions, why don't we also ask if they have already accounting standards relating to those resources, because there are some jurisdictions that already have those kinds of standards, and that will be helpful for us. So thanks.
Okay, thanks, Camira. So what I'll do is I'll just run around the other members that want to comment at this stage and then go back to you, Edwin, just to respond. So I've got Lucy and then Todd.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Actually, I have the same recommendation as Camira's. I think we have to consider, well, the recommendation is also to consider specific individuals, but perhaps we can include as target respondents for our survey the IPSAS implementers of the sampled 31 countries, which were referred to in the IMF October 2018 fiscal monitor. And this is indicated in footnote number 2, introduction and project overview, page 24 of the PDF. As disclosed in the IMF fiscal monitor, these countries cover 61% of the global economy, and their natural resources assets were equal 38% of the gross domestic product. So if we can get their views on the information we want to gather from the survey, I think it might be valuable inputs for our natural resources project. As to the recommended due date, I suggest that we postpone it until such time that the task force has identified the respondents that will validly represent the users of the proposed CP. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Lucy. Todd?
Thanks. I had very similar comments to Camira. I looked at this and wondered why we would only target IPSASB member countries, and a few others. I think being quite deliberate about who we target is the right way to go. And I think we do need to think about the amount of time that we give people to complete the survey as well. It might look simple, but sometimes the procedures that countries want to work through to get the right answers and all the rest of it can take a little bit of time. So we may need to think about giving people, I don't know, 6 weeks or something.
Thanks, Todd. Lindy, over to you as Task Force Chair.
Thanks. And I guess as a task force, we did debate a lot about, well, who should we send this to, and should we make the circle bigger and add more time? But I think we are trying to develop something that goes into the consultation paper, which will have that broader consultation in any case. So what we just try to do is to get a sense of what we can, some information that we can build on to put in the CP, and then obviously it will have a broader audience view. So it was just a really short type of attempt for us to get more information instead of Edwin doing, hey, Google, tell me about this jurisdiction. So yeah, so it wasn't meant to be a consultation process before the broader consultation paper. And that's why it's quite limited just to the IPSASB. But we also identified that maybe some jurisdictions would have readily available information for us. So I guess just to put that forward, thank you.
Thanks, Lindy. Ross?
Yeah, just to kind of echo Lindy's comments, I think we should be careful we don't overthink what this survey is all about. Maybe the wording's not right, but it really is an information gathering exercise for staff to make sure we have an understanding of the different types of legal frameworks that are in place. And I think we're not looking to understand every single framework that exists, but the different types of frameworks. So we already know from our research that there are frameworks that prioritize surface rights versus subsurface rights, and some that don't. And I think predominantly from my time working in the mining space, there's not much else beyond that. There are some kind of piecemeal ones or frameworks that are less developed, but in jurisdictions that have well-developed mining and natural resource development and accounting, generally, you can fit it into 2-3 buckets maximum. So we're really just trying to gather that information to inform the consultation paper, which is really when we're going to consult the broader constituency. So I think we shouldn't be too cautious and over-engineer this staff survey to the point where we're slowing the project down. We know we won't have a consultation paper to look at or finalize at the earliest till June or next September. So we'll have more time to continue to work to finalize things if we have gaps. This is really just meant to kick it off and make sure we know we're informed what we're talking about, at least with the members around the board and task force members. So I would caution on giving too much time and looking too much to try and be extremely exclusive on this. It's not a formal consultation. It's a staff gathering exercise, and it's to inform the consultation itself.
Thanks, Ross. Mike, and then I'll sum up on this.
So, Chair, based on the conversation, I initially supported Lucy and Camille and others, but I think from what Lindy said, we should let the task force drive who they're going to ask and just keep it limited. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think that's where we get to. I think, Lindy and Ross, I think you've assured us this is really just to make sure we've got input to developing the drafting, and the intention isn't that this is a formal consultation. So I think, and the advantage of keeping it within the board at this stage is obviously that gives us, a tighter group to work with. I guess then the question though probably is, picking up on Liz' point, are there any, and I think we leave this for staff to have a look at and say, are there any other key jurisdictions where we think we can pick up a contact that would be able to inform us, and thinking about those that have significant holdings of natural resources. And I'm kind of thinking, for example, maybe Norway, for example, and we do have I know we have a contact there from, prior involvement in the board, one or two. So not to hold this process up, but that might act as a check in longer time, just in terms of whether there's anything that we, have obviously missed in that initial analysis and drafting. So we don't need to make this exhaustive, but if there are a few like that where we could do something in longer time, perhaps that's the way forward on this. Okay, but it still allows the task force to make progress. Okay, Edwin, okay with you on that?
Yep.
Okay, so move us on to the next item then, please.
Okay. So the next two items are really going through the draft introduction, the draft structure of the CP, and then the last item is going through the draft introduction in chapter 1. I didn't really have slides for this because it was really meant to be a page flip, but I don't know if we have time for that now. So I guess I'll very quickly talk about the draft structure. So that is in agenda item 10.2.3. And if you look at the back of the item, there's a few pages in the appendix where we have pretty much the section titles of what we plan to put into the consultation paper. So I did receive some comments on this section, and the key comment I got was right now in chapter 2, we separately talk about consideration of legalship or legal structure and how that would impact control. And you'll notice that I didn't have that in chapters 3 and 4 because my thinking was that it would be kind of incorporated into the application of the asset recognition criteria. So the key comment I got was for me to add the consideration of control and legal structure into chapters 3 and 4 as well. So if the board has any other comments on the overall structure of the CP, I would welcome those now.
Thanks, Edwin. So I think, obviously it really is a kind of understatement at this point in time. Are there any obvious things or inconsistencies that you see rather than drafting? We'll see the sections coming back. So there'll be discussions as we go through those. So just open it up for any other sort of omissions that members see in terms of the outline that Edwin's given for us. No, okay, so I think we're good on the outline. So move us then into the draft of the introduction in chapter 1.
Okay. So the last agenda item was I provided the draft introduction and chapter 1 of the CP as they stand now. This version has been reviewed by the task force, but as you can see, it is still a draft, and you know, we are open to comments. So as Ross indicated back on Friday, this isn't set in stone at all. This is just a consultation paper. So we do welcome any comments that members have. In terms of comments I've received so far, the key comment that I've received is on paragraph 15. So that is on page 8. And I guess the question that I got multiple times was the point of the consultation paper was to deal with unextracted or unharvested natural resources. And this paragraph seems to be talking about resources after extraction. So I just want to clarify that I guess when I was writing this, initially my thinking process was to point out that once extracted, all of these items are resources, like there's no question on that. So the whole point of the consultation paper is to really step back and ask the question, well, what about before extraction? Do those qualify as resources? So I'm certainly going to revise this paragraph to have that point in there. And so, as I said, I was originally going to do a section by section flip, but I think in the interest of time, the other key item that I wanted to bring up to the board is in paragraph 1.11. So that's back in page 16. And so when the task force looked at the various definitions of natural resources, we looked to plain English definitions, and then we also looked to economic texts. And one of the key points that was brought up when we looked at economic texts was that from an economics perspective, natural resources could result in cash inflows and outflows. So the way that I framed it was this consultation paper is really focusing on the cash inflows because we're more interested in the recognition of natural resource assets and whether those can be recognized as assets. And more importantly, in my view, if there is a cash outflow or potential cash outflow related to a natural resource, my thinking was that it would already be captured by IPSAS 19. So it would be some provision or either a contingent liability that needs to be disclosed or a provision that needs to be recognized. So I explained that a bit in this paragraph to say that we're not focusing on the cash outflow, and this consultation paper is really just focusing on the potential cash inflows from natural resources. And I just wanted to get the board's view on whether this is the correct approach to go with this thinking.
Thanks, Edwin. So comments on that or any other points people want to bring up? Thomas.
Yeah, just to kind of highlight that during the discussion of the CAG, I can recollect, but I don't have it in front of me now, that CAG members reminded the board of the fact that with these resources, there might be some obligations being connected, like restoration or other kind of environmental obligations. So I'm not so sure whether it would be appropriate to kind of limit the consultation really on the cash inflow side without kind of looking at the cash outflow side as well. I agree that there is already a standard, but the question is everybody aware of the fact that these obligations might be covered under the standard IPSAS 19?
Thanks, Thomas. See thumbs up on that. Camira?
Thanks. Well, first, I would like to recognize that this is a very good draft already, so very well explained and everything. So I just have a couple of minor comments. On paragraph 21, when we refers when we refer to IPSAS 32, maybe the appropriate word instead of developing natural resources will be exploiting natural resources. Then moving to paragraph 29, when we are describing what are the private sector practices, I would suggest, well, in case of A and B, yes, they are relevant, but in case of C, D, and E, we already covered those topics in paragraph 21. So maybe we can just remove them or just make it more briefly. And then in paragraph 31, when we are referring to GFS definition of natural, definition of in general, what are the purposes of GFS and SNA? We are saying an evaluation of a government's impact on the economy. So I would just be cautious about that. Maybe just revise that. And that's it. Yeah. And in terms of the definitions that was very good presented, all the different definitions from different sources, I would be a bit cautious of using reference to specific web pages or websites. I would rather give more importance to presenting the definitions in more relevant sources. So thanks.
Okay, thanks, Camilla. A number of comments there. Edwin, any particular responses, or you consent to take those forward?
Yeah, we're going to take those forward.
Okay. So Ross, you wanted to come in, and then I'll go to Mike.
Yeah, just reflecting on the discussion we had last week on the sovereign powers issue and sovereign powers in their own right in activities, I think we need to do a little bit more work on making it clear in sovereign powers in particular when we're talking about the sovereign power in its own right and the activities related to that. And I know we've already had an email exchange with one member where we're it's not crystal clear on the chain there on when sovereign powers start to become activities. And like we talk royalty regimes and things like this, I think we need to clarify that up front, or people are going to get a little bit lost in that sovereign powers issue because it is a little bit high level. And I think we have to clarify and make that meaningful to the readers on what we really mean, because from the exchange we had with the one particular board member, it was already clear that we were mixing what we were talking about between us and staff and that board member. So we're going to work with that member on that. But I did want to highlight that that's something you'll probably see in the next version of the chapter, a little bit more clarity on that.
Thanks, Ross. Mike.
Thanks, Jess. I was going to raise the same point Ross has, so thanks, Ross. I agree with you. But it was also Thomas's view about cash inflows, cash outflows. I suppose Thomas, help me here, because I was thinking Edwin's explanation, this is really the focus here is on inflows, was what the project should be all about. Have we got an asset or not?
Ross, back on that.
Yeah, I think that is what the project's about. We're really trying to fix the gap in our literature right now. So all these other issues that the CAG was identifying, we talk about, we actually have guidance. So it's not that we're not going to address it. It's that we're going to highlight where we have that guidance and what that guidance says in the context of the discussion. So I don't think it would make sense in a consultation paper to be openly asking about the guidance we already have. It's more about highlighting that and framing the questions around where we're trying to fill the gaps and if there's any changes needed. So it really is a nuanced issue that we're going to have to work on, but I would draw attention to past consultation papers in the last couple of years, measurement, the public sector specific financial instruments, the heritage paper, where we had to straddle this issue. So we're going to have to work on that, but I do caution that we don't approach these issues like we don't have guidance, because we do. And I think the key is just highlighting and making it clear, as Thomas has noted, what that guidance says in the context of what we're proposing for the natural resource asset gap that we're looking to bridge, where we currently do not have any guidance.
Thanks, Ross. And one other point that I think kind of emerged, at least from my reading on this, is currently we're projecting to approve this in a year's time. And obviously we've got other projects that are proceeding. So there's some contingency, particularly around the impact of the revenue EDs. But it's probably better to write it as though those are effectively at the final standards stage, even although that's sort of anticipating, but at least then we kind of get the, what the landscape looks like. And then if depending on progress and what our constituents say on those EDs, we'll have to revise as necessary, but probably worth writing it with that sort of 2021 perspective in there as well. Not a problem with IPSAS 19. I've got Mark and then back to Thomas.
Just another small reflection from my side, having had the discussions last Friday on sovereign powers, where we discussed the issue at what time it can become an asset. I think it's also important to differentiate, as we have done in the infrastructure project about control, to differentiate what is an element and what is the recognition criteria. Because when we were talking about the measurability, which was brought forward, I think this is rather related to the recognition, but I think we should start actually to ask ourselves at what time it becomes an element. So this was another reflection of the discussion from my side I had over the weekend.
Thanks, Mark. I think that's really helpful, and it is those concepts that are in the conceptual framework that can help us, but communicating those is going to be quite tricky. And in particular, is that point you draw attention to, which is something can, in theory, be an element, but actually, we can't measure it, and therefore it doesn't meet recognition requirements. So, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I just wanted to quickly react to Ross's point, and I think I fully agree with what Ross has said. Just want to outline two kind of issues. First of all, I think the CAG discussion brought to light that the two sides of the asset and the obligation are connected to each other, and I think that has to come out. And the second point is the existing guidance has not yet led to an accounting behavior of these countries that they are single-sided showing the obligation. So it's not that they are using the existing guidance, they are just showing nothing at the moment. So I think there is value in making that clear. Because it is not yet the current accounting practice that people are reacting to these obligations connected to natural resources. So it's not only the asset side missing, it's both sides missing in the accounting treatment, even though there is guidance existing.
Thanks for that caution, Thomas. Okay. Any other comments from members? No, I'm not seeing any flags raised, so that's good. So thanks, Edwin, for bringing that. Thanks also to the task force for the input on that. I know there have been a number of calls on this, and I think that shows that we're making good progress. I think we're starting to zero in on the what are going to be the contentious points we're going to have to explain to our stakeholders, and it's helpful we're having those discussions in the board at this stage. So, Edwin, we've given direction in terms of taking forward that survey. Anything else you need, you or Lindy as task force chair need from the board at this stage?
Not at this stage, but as I said before, we would welcome any comments on the draft CP if any members have any. So please feel free to just email them to myself.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. So with that, we draw the discussion on natural resources to a close. And Ross, I think we now move on to your Programme and Technical Director's report.
Great. Thanks, Ian, and thanks to all the members. Not a lot to say from my side on the Program Technical Director report, other than I think we've made good progress at this meeting. We had four items up for approval, 2 final pronouncements and 2 EDs, which we've cleared. So I think that keeps us on track for the current work program. I think normally in December we have our annual in-depth update in the Program Technical Director's report. And I think like the last couple years in December, it's going to be quite an important one as we have several items up for approval as the work program shows. And And I think we've got the virtual check-in coming up at the end of October, which I think is going to be critical to whether or not we can deliver on the package of EDs that's up for approval. I think it's clear that ED 77 is going to be the main focus for the October update, but staff will be working to progress both ED 78 as well as ED 76 in the meantime, in the lead up to the October in-period check-in with the board. So I guess at this point, it's more just to throw it over to members for any points they want to discuss specifically on the work program. You'll remember on day one of the meeting, I highlighted the additional dates that we'd be adding in and around the set December dates to try and make it possible to work through the various items we're planning to approve. And I think in the October check-in, I'll need to bring a draft agenda of what that full meeting will look like. And so we can walk the board through the thinking on how we'll handle the December session and hopefully work through these items. So with that, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say at this point, Ian. Just happy to hear any comments on those various proposals for the board.
Okay, so open for comments. So I've got Rod, then Mike.
Thanks, Chair. Ross, you and staff have done a fabulous job as usual, so thank you very much for your support. Just wondering, and this is the same question I asked last time. I'm just sort of curious about an update on the same question. How are you and staff doing, given the whole COVID situation, working at home and so forth? Are staff getting enough time off? How are people feeling? I suppose staff development is perhaps an issue. I don't know. Obviously it's something that is very important. So I'm just kind of curious your assessment of the lay of the land at the moment.
Russ?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rod. And I think, I think everybody's finding it a challenge with the remote working. And I think this meeting in particular, it starts to hit home that we're going to be working remote for a few more meetings, both not working together in the office. So, I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that it's not hard and that, staff are really working in an uncomfortable place from where we have in the past. But at the same time, I think we've really seized the opportunity to use technology more than we have in the past. And we found that it does make things better in some ways, and it does allow us to be a little more nimble, a little more innovative in how we develop our papers and work together and move things forward. To your other point on time off, I think staff have all found their opportunities to get their vacation in over summer in particular. I know all of the staff found time to squeeze in vacations in their own little ways. And I think everybody is on goal for the year to try and get all their PTO, we call it PTO, their vacation time in, even with the pandemic. And that has been a struggle, to be honest. I've struggled with it myself on whether I really want to take a full week off when I can't really do anything and, stuck in my local neighborhood where I spend all my time anyway. So, but I found my ways to take, longer weekends and, find little events and things I can do close to home. And I know the rest of the staff have done that as well. That's not to say we're not working hard, because we are. And I think we're pushing the limits of our ability to move quickly on some of these projects. And, I have to give kudos to the staff for really embracing the current environment and the need to be innovative and question the way we've done things in the past. And I really think the team deserves a lot of credit for being resilient and working to deliver on this aggressive work program that we have. The staff want to move it forward as much as the board members do. I think we've got growing external pressure to continue to deliver on our work program. And when we don't, have justified reasons on why we don't. And, I think the bar's gone up for us and we're embracing it and we're doing our best with it. But the longer this goes on, I think the harder it is for everyone. The board has volunteers, the staff, our constituents. And I don't think until this pandemic is starting to be behind us, it's going to get easier.
Thanks, Ross. Well done.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, you've talked about the pace of delivery, but I think the other thing that probably is there is, you know, personally, I think the quality of the papers has been really good. So I think the quality is there, and that's not being sacrificed in my view. You know, in terms of the, you know, what you're bringing to the board, I think this has been a really good pack of papers for this board. So I think, you know, as a board, we should acknowledge that it's a really good job that you've done, and that's really helped us as a board. Mike, and then go to Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. It just occurred to me that when I read through the program that there's not a lot of stuff to talk to the CAG about in December. Thomas, I'll be interested in your thoughts. I wondered whether we can't get some views from the CAG on the natural resources project, or maybe the leases RFI, although that might be getting a bit late, but might still be useful if we get their views before we finalise that document. So just some thoughts for you, Ross or Thomas.
So I'll go to Thomas first, and then back to Staff.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. First of all, I just wanted to echo kind of the compliments to staff from the CAG perspective. I think it is quite a challenge with all the virtual meetings, both the board meetings and the CAG meetings, to capture everything. But still, from a CAG perspective, I find that all discussion results and all relevant issues from the CAG discussions were properly reflected in the papers and in the work of staff. So thank you for that from my side. I think that's really excellent. Regarding December meeting, yes, I think we are, Mike, or let's say we didn't yet discuss about what we should include in the agenda. Normally we do that between the board chair, the technical director, and myself. I think certainly natural resources would be something which should be on the agenda. I think we also discussed some topics regarding implementation when we discussed the measurement topics regarding measurement bases which were used. And the leases project could be on the agenda as well, but I think I want to discuss that with Ian and Ross before. But certainly, I think there is some room for a little bit more detailed view on implementation topics when it comes to kind of measurement basis use and things like that.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is a need for a discussion, and in a sense, actually, things have been moving pretty quickly. So, you know, that's part of the reason why we've had to hold off. But yeah, that we need that discussion coming up. Okay, James, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Ian. If I may, I just wanted to touch base on Rod's question very briefly, and I appreciate and thank Ross for his response. Rod's question obviously goes to a very difficult answer, probably one that Ross can't answer on his own. I'm speaking on behalf of staff from what he knows. So just wanted to give Rod and the board some reassurance that the steps to hear from staff indirectly, anonymously, you know, so we get a real sense of the pulse of the check, and as best as we can. Just wanted to acknowledge that there's ongoing efforts and communications through IFAC's human resource and human capital. We have surveys regularly about returning to work, degree of comfort level, preferences, timeline, surveys around employee engagement, which is a satisfaction area, and to the best of that, those tools can help us understand where the pressures are, the morale, the sentiments, and so forth. We are using those to help guide our broader decision-making around human capital and employee morale, resources, et cetera. Personally, as I run our management team meetings within the standard setting boards, we regularly have check-ins around trying to understand where the pulse is, the heartbeat, what our concerns are. And it may not just be from one group, but what other groups might be saying, so we can learn and adapt and respond. And I think finally on your point about development, Ross and I and Human Capital have had recent and we have continuing discussions about actions that we want to do in the immediate term around talent development, talent reviews, and also in support of Ross's alignment of his team in support of the work of the board. So maybe there's more to a quick assessment of whether we're happy or not, but we're trying, and we're trying to stay connected as we move through those items. So I just wanted to share that with the board because it is an important question. Ian, Ian, I do have one other intervention I would like to make with your permission to the board before you close, but please let me know when I have that opportunity.
Okay, so we'll just finish off and check whether there are any other comments from board members. No? Okay, so I think we're fine with that. I mean, I think, you know, going back to Ross's point, I think the October check-in is going to be really important for us in terms of setting the scene for December. And certainly Ross and I have had conversations about, you know, we're very much aware of the points that board members have been raising about how will December work. How does this work in terms of the package that goes to constituents for consultation, timeframes, and so on. And where we get to in October will clearly influence the deliverability of, you know, decisions, approvals in December, but also how we work going forward. So we will, you know, come back to you and reflect at the end of the October meeting on how we see the way forward and the options and so on at that. But rest assured that this comes up very frequently in discussions, not only between Ross and I, but with other members of staff and so on. So it's very much there. Ross, anything more from you at this stage?
No, nothing more from me other than thanks to the board members and TAs for, you know, moving their schedules to add additional days, work at all hours of the day to help us deliver the program. I think, you know, we don't acknowledge enough the hard work of members and making sure we can move everything forward. And I know staff really appreciates it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think a public thanks from me as board chair on that. It really is a team effort. The staff have played their part, but it also depends on board members and technical advisors and other staff from national standard setting boards. We do get a huge amount of support. So thanks everyone for all of that and the way in which it's moved us forward during this difficult period. Okay, so with that, James, back to you.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity to address the board. First of all, I do want to echo and congratulate the board and staff on a very, very intense and a very successful week, which I'm sure all of you will agree feels like a very long week. First day Monday was a very long time ago, it seems. You may recall, given the time that has passed, but on day one, I had the opportunity to update you on IFAC board developments. And at that session, I reported on Ian's presentation on IPSASB to the board. And you'll recall, I noted how well that session went, simply on the basis that Ian had a great story to tell. And that story, of course, was really all of the tremendous work and accomplishments of you as board members, TAs, observers, and staff of the IPSASB. So I do hope that very sincere and warm compliment to all of you was received and obviously is being echoed at the moment. Of course, we don't get where we are without great leadership. And I didn't thank Ian and compliment him for his great presentation and of course for his leadership of the board. And it's this important fact that I wanted to draw on. At the IFAC board, they also had one additional decision to make at that time, and I have the great pleasure in announcing. And that decision was to consider and approve Ian's reappointment as IPSASB chair through the end of 2024. As a global standard setter of the IPSASB, and all of you and all of us have a continual challenge to change and challenge what we do and how we do it in delivering high quality, timely, and relevant standards and being efficient and effective in what we do. And I think it's obvious that Ian embraces this challenge. And Ian's reappointment reassures that IPSASB's very strong track record under his leadership will continue. And I think this is especially important in seeing delivery of our strategy and work program, as well as enhancements under our governance review. So Ian, I'm personally grateful to you for being willing and to make yourself available to continue to have leadership. And I believe it makes a lot of sense to have stability in IPSASB leadership over this time. Obviously, this was a view that was shared by the IFAC board in approving your renomination, as well as the Public Interest Committee, who were asked to advise on the process and related decisions. So Ian's current term finishes at the end of next year, and his final 3-year term begins January 2022 and finishes at the end of 2024. And we will be issuing a press release later today or tomorrow, but I did want to share this news first and foremost with the board itself and technical advisors and staff and TAs. I'm going to see if I can break Zoom and I'm going to ask all of the members and all the participants online to turn on your microphones and join me in a round of applause to congratulate Ian on his forward reappointment for a final term as chairman of IPSASB. Well done. Thank you, Ian, to you.
Thanks, James, and thanks everyone for that. I mean, I think, you know, I do care a lot about what we as a board do, but it is not only about, you know, it really is what we're achieving, and I think we're doing some great things. It's a great time. There's a huge amount going on around the world in terms of, you know, implementation of our standards, and I think now, you know, the pandemic has really shown that this is the time when governments need high quality information. They need to be accountable for the decisions they're taking. So it really does feel like this is the time, and it really is a huge privilege to be able to sort of keep carrying the torch forward. And you know, it is really a team effort, and it is about you as the board, it's about staff, it's about technical advisors, and I think that's one of the great things about doing this job, is when that comes together, and it has come together this week, I think, and I think it will continue to come together. So thanks everyone for all your hard work. I would just add one other thing, which is one of the key things in moving forward will be that I know that David, as my technical advisor, has agreed that he won't be hanging up his boots just yet. So he will also be staying as my technical advisor throughout that period. So David, thank you very much for everything that you do. You know, I think just you're a huge asset to the team. So thank you for that. And I think with that, genuinely, we do come to the end of the public agenda for this meeting. So unless, Ross, you tell me there's anything else that I've forgotten that we should do today. So we'll just say thanks, everyone. As James said, Monday last week seems a long while ago. It is a huge challenge working virtually. I think everybody's risen to it. We've had some great inputs. I think we've had some really good discussions. So thanks for that. Thanks for the time. Thanks for keeping with us in the virtual environment and with the check-ins. That's becoming very important in terms of moving our work forward. And with that, say thanks and farewell for this time. Look forward to seeing people back for the session in October. The board itself now has an in-camera session. What we will do is take our 10-minute break before we go into that. So board members, take a 10-minute break, don't go away. Everybody else, look forward to seeing you back later in October. Okay, so bye for now.
Bye.